We're live.
All right. Call this meeting of the Housing Authority of the City of Salem to order. If the clerk will call the roll.
Commissioner Kaiser. Present. Commissioner Anderson.
Likewise.
Commissioner Nanke.
Here.
Commissioner Leung. Here. Commissioner Osick.
Here.
Commissioner Hoy.
Here.
Actually, Chair Hoy. Commissioner Cook.
Here.
And Commissioner Lewis.
Here.
If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good crowd tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. We have election of vice chair. Do you have a motion? It was a rhetorical question.
Yes.
Do you want to sit by me?
No.
You want to borrow Kara's?
I believe you were going to nominate Councilor Kaiser.
I thought I
remember
was
correctly.
too, but I just wanted to make sure we had that conversation. I'm a little discombobulated tonight, folks, because I realized I brought my briefcase. It was the wrong briefcase. I've got notes for a workers' compensation case I'm trying tomorrow, not any of my city council stuff. Thank you, Dan. So I nominate Councilor Kaiser for vice chair. I wrote it on my notes.
Councilor Kaiser has been nominated. It's been seconded by Councilor Nanke. Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of the nomination say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Councilor Kaiser. You're the vice chair of the Housing Authority of the City of Salem.
Such an honor, thank you.
Would you like to thank you?
Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No, we do not.
And we have nobody signed up for public comment. Councilor Kaiser?
Thanks. I motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
The
to approve
consent
the
calendar
consent
includes the 3.1A, which are minutes from the January 28th Salem Housing Authority meeting.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, no resolutions, no public hearings, no special orders of business. We have an information report, and we have Nicole Utes here to present.
Thank you. I'm Nicole Utes. I'm a housing supervisor at Salem Housing Authority.
Could you pull the microphone a little closer,
Oh,
please?
sorry. Tonight, there's an information report regarding the HRAP program, the Homeless Rental Assistance Program, in your packet. And this is a glowing story of success for one of our clients in the Homeless Rental Assistance Program. Within a year's time, they've gone from complete homeless to having many barriers to purchasing their first home just this last month. So this is something that they accredit to, that every supporter of the HRAP has helped to contribute to this amazing outcome for this household. They are very thankful. Currently, we have 127 individuals placed out of the HRAP program, and 61 currently pending for placement. So the program continues to progress.
Councilor Anderson, you have a question?
I actually have a comment, and I've said this many times before, but I haven't said it directly to you, Nicole. These reports are terrific. They take statistics and make them into human beings. And that's very gratifying to read of the work you folks are doing, and they're also very well written. And so I commend you both for how you wrote about it and also what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. On the voucher lease-up, on the program management report, we have 91% issuance of vouchers out there. We did just issue 200 good news letters to hopefully fill the remaining percentage that our budget will allow for. So we do anticipate those coming through the door shortly. As you can see, the portfolio occupancy for all the properties that we own and manage, which is something that I directly supervise, is still anywhere from 99 to 100% housed. Obviously, we could always use more housing with statistics like that. On a follow-up question to the last council meeting, there was a question presented regarding the point in time count. I do have those numbers available if you would like me to address that now.
That would be great.
Okay. So the official count for this year in 2019 has not been released yet. They anticipate the numbers to be at 1462, which is an increase of almost 500 to 600 more. That obviously doesn't include all of those that we weren't able to locate during the point in time count. I do have the official reports. I know, Mr. Anderson, that you had specifically asked if you would like to know all the specific details of it. I have the 2017 and 18 report here for you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one, because I'd seen something forwarded into me in regards to the point-in-time counts this year, and that we shouldn't think that there are that many additional because the counting was better this year than last year as well. Can we estimate really how much maybe of an increase there was or wasn't?
To be honest, I would say that it's probably pretty close to 1,400. The count did go all day, from what I understand. As in previous, it had done in certain shifts at specific times. So I do believe they did count a full 24 hours this time around.
Yeah, it sounded like they had a lot of good volunteers, and they got a much better count than
Yes,
potentially
so
last year. So it may
it-
not be that we had a large increase in homeless over the year, just that we were actually able to
Just
count.
more were found this
Yeah.
time. Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you for the excellent report. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Seeing no further business, we are adjourned.
Let's see if the mayor can match the. Maybe not. Maybe he just abandoned it.
should show that.
Ownership, who's the vice?
This coffee cup's still here, so it'll be back.
There it is.
There it is.
You're probably trying to get that last cookie.
Just letting the CCTV crew know how committed you all are to getting us out of here before it all turns to ice. So.
Thank you.
Call this meeting of the City Urban Renewal Agency for February 25th to order. If the recorder would please call the roll.
Board Member Kaiser. Present. Board Member Anderson. Board Member Nanki. Board Member Leung. Here. Board Member Ossick. Here. Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Cook.
Here.
Board Member Lewis.
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. Okay, do we have any additions or deletions?
No.
Okay. Sure I'm looking at the right one. Do you have any public comment? Okay. Consent calendar?
I move approval of the consent calendar
Do we have a poll?
with the following polls. There's a dramatic pause. I
I'm
apologize.
sorry, no, it was dramatic.
Very dramatic.
Sucked me right in on that.
Sorry about that. Item 3.3A by Councilor Anderson, the Riverfront Downtown Urban Renewal Area Strategic Project Grant Program. And item 3.3B by Councilor Anderson, funding authorization and grant amendment for final construction payment on the Peter Courtney Minto Island Bicycle and Pedestrian Bridge.
Very good. That gives you an opportunity to vote on.
That gives you an opportunity to vote on the minutes from our January 28th meeting, as well as item 3.3C, which is the third amendment to the development agreement between the Urban Renewal Agency and of the City of Salem and the Salem LTC properties. And that is it.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. We have no public hearings. We have two special orders of business then. Councilor Anderson, 3.3A.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that we approve the guidelines for RDURA Strategic Project Grant Program and allocate $100,000 from the RDURA Capital Improvement Grant Program fiscal year 2018-19, budget of $5.5 million.
second by Kaiser.
I'm all in favor of this, but I pulled it because I had a few questions that I thought maybe the public should hear, and I wrote down these questions on my agenda, which is sitting at my desk at home in my other briefcase. But Director Rutherford and I talked about it today, so what was the burning question on my mind?
She knows the answers, and we'll guess the questions.
Yeah, it's reverse Jeopardy. I'll take RDURA for $200, please.
So we're both hoping that I have a good memory.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So the question had to do with why the focus of funding is on elements that are really targeted more towards the businesses or property owners rather than towards the individuals that are experiencing
If I
homelessness.
could interrupt you now, I'm remembering too, the summary was we were having a new grant program to support the goals of addressing homelessness.
Yes.
And I sort of viewed that as addressing the homeless population downtown themselves. And what this really appears to be doing, and it's a good thing, is addressing how the downtown properties owners deal with the homelessness situation downtown in terms of protecting their property and their garbage and that kind of stuff. So that was my main concern, that it's not directed toward the homeless themselves, but to their presence downtown and how that might affect the property owners.
That's correct. So this item is one of a number of recommendations that came out of the Downtown Homeless Task Force that we had the work session on last week. So a number of the recommendations from that task force are really targeted towards facilities and services for individuals who are homeless, and some of the recommendations were tied to things like cleanliness downtown, security and safety downtown. So this grant program is moving forward with implementing one of the numerous recommendations. And this one is to provide grant funding for site improvements such as improved garbage containers, trash containers, security cameras, lighting, those sorts of improvements for properties within the downtown urban renewal area.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. 3.3B, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make this one shorter. I move the staff recommendation concerning the $690,000 of RDURA funds transferred to help pay for the Peter Courtney Bridge.
Second.
Again, I had some questions on this, and again, Director Rutherford and I spoke about this. I understand the money to pay for the Courtney Bridge is coming out of the $4.3 million downtown urban renewal funds that went toward the Division Street project, and then that shortfall of $690,000 that was taken out of that is coming out of the Public Works last bond for streets and bridges, and which is terrific, because I understand we did such a good job on the last bond and the construction costs were down that we have money left over. And my specific concern was, right now we have allocated $3.6 million out of that bonding fund to do something with Marine Drive, and I'm sure we'll be working on that in the continuing months. I just don't want to make sure that that money is coming out of the fund that was allocated for Marine Drive.
No chance.
I didn't think so either, Councilor Lewis, but I'd like to hear it from the those who really know.
Yeah, Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director, what Councilor Lewis said. So, yes, the $680,000 is from, there's still some savings. The Marine Drive was an actual line item on the bond, so that $3-some million allocated are still sitting in the bank with for that amount.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. Just sort of as a further question and aside, if there is any more money left in the bond savings, could that potentially be allocated to increase the monies for Marine Drive?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
You remember Marine Drive, we agreed not to do anything last year in the budget by a majority. Yeah, okay. Councilor Lewis?
Okay, my interest is piqued. So what is the left after the 690,000?
You know, Brian Martin was not feeling well, and I allowed him to go home early. But we can get you the amount. We had some money reserved for some issues. Now, as those issues are resolving themselves, there's money freed up, and we can certainly get you those amounts.
Okay. Will that be part of the budget process then, or will that be a separate?
We can do it as part of the budget. That's probably the easiest thing, but we can get you an accounting of what remains. As projects are now being completed, we have a better handle of what remains over and above the Marine Drive monies.
All righty, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. And Urban Renewal Agency's adjourned. Call the City Council meeting for February 25th to order. If the recorder would please call a roll.
Councilor Kaiser? Present. Councilor Anderson?
Likewise.
Councilor Nanki? Here. Councilor Leung?
Here.
Councilor Ossick? Here. Councilor Hoy?
Here.
Councilor Cook?
Here.
Councilor Lewis?
Here.
And Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Additions or deletions?
I move additions and deletions to the agenda, including item 4.A, which is added a revised grading plan attachment, and item 6D, a report revised to include public comment that was received during the comment period.
Second by Kaiser. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes. No proclamations. We have a presentation tonight from Polk County Sheriff Mark Garton and District Attorney Feldman.
Stand as backup as I usually do.
See the backup?
It's executive security.
Oh, and Lyle's here as well, County Commissioner. Orders.
That's not me. I was, I can wing it, I guess. Well, thank you. We're not going to take too much time, and really just to go over the basics of the current levy that we're operating under for the Polk County Sheriff's Office, and then District Attorney Felton and I will kind of just walk through this as we've done this a few times. So, in 2015, voters passed public safety levy in Polk County the cap rate was 45 cents per thousand. It allowed to hire for 12 patrol deputies, 5 jail staff, 3 prosecutors, and 2 legal support staff. And then it also paid for the rental of 2 juvenile detention beds. So that passed, and it takes a long time to hire a police officer and get them trained and to the point where they're by themselves and out on the road. And we were down to 7 people in our office, and we were working 10 hours a day. And so it was a bad time. It was just really rough, and we had some unfortunate things happen, but fortunately the levy passed, and then we were able to start the hiring process to get all these promises that were made passed. Even though the cap was set at 45 cents per thousand, the average over the 4 years has been 33 cents is what the commissioners have levied. And so it was a 5-year levy. We're in the 4th year. So the commissioners agreed to go out early, 1 year early for this levy. And the reason is really to protect our investment that we've all paid for, because it costs about $150,000 to train a patrol deputy or hire and train within their first year. So that's a lot of money that we've invested into our folks. So we really want to make sure that our employees know that they have a secure future, because we did have a lot of folks leave in our first levy before it passed. We had people leaving to go to other agencies, so we've experienced that. One other thing that the levy allowed us to do is it restored our point team, which is our Polk County Interagency Narcotics Team. That is a multi-agency drug team that works inside and outside of every city, and there's a detective basically from each agency and the Oregon State Police that all work together to combat drug dealers. I mean, that's what they look for. It's not for users. And then it also
helps the DA's office. So I'll let Aaron talk.
Thank you, Sheriff, and Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's a pleasure to spend another Monday evening with some of you to talk about the public safety levy in Polk County. And sorry, let me get in here. Oh, sorry. There you go. But it's really nice to be able to speak with other councilors tonight, all of you, especially to talk with the councilors who represent the West Salem wards and all the members of the council to talk about why the public safety levy means so much to Polk County and also why it's especially meaningful to citizens of Salem. I'm a West Salem person. People often ask me, well, why do we need the levy in West Salem? We have the Salem Police Department. They keep us safe. And yes, they do. We have an outstanding police department in the city of Salem. They do a tremendous, tremendous job. But what people have to remember is that when a city of Salem police officer arrests somebody, they bring them to the Polk County Jail. When they're at the Polk County Jail, the Polk County District Attorney's Office then prosecutes them and completes that process of the circuit. And so that's why it's important. And I want you all to know what we're telling folks. We have a lot of statistics. We have all these things we've talked about with you. But the simple message we're telling people is answering the question, so what? Statistics always beg the question, so what? Well, the question we're putting to people is, are you safer as a result of the passage of the levy? Yes, you are. Quite simply, yes, you are. And an example of that is DUIs are up as a result in Polk County. And the reason that they're up is that we have more law enforcement officers on the road. We have more Polk County Sheriff's deputies that we've been able to hire on the road. Both Sheriff Garton and I are in our offices, our DUI statistics are up. And the reason for that is we have more people who are out there on the road who are being intercepted by the Polk County Sheriff's deputies. And therefore, the roads are safer because they're getting more people off the roads. And that happens in Salem proper and also out on the roads in Polk County as well. I have more deputies in my office who are trained, more experienced in prosecuting those cases. And quite frankly, the people who are committing those crimes are being taken off the roads as well, so they're safer too. So safety is not just an abstract concept, it's a very real concept. So at the end of the day, are the people of Salem safer as a result of the public safety levy and their investment in it? Yes. Yes, they are. So we very much appreciate the investment that the people in West Salem made in terms of the citizens of Polk County in this levy. We very much appreciate the support that this council made when we were asking for the support last time. And through this information, we're hoping that we'll have your support again. So we thank you very, very much for this time tonight. And we're always happy to answer questions from councilors or any citizens who are here tonight as well. So that's really all I wanted to add to the excellent presentation
Aaron,
the sheriff made.
could you just clarify one thing? This
Of course,
is a
Mr. Mayor.
continuation of a 5-year levy, not...
Yeah, the sheriff says we're going to get, it's a renewal, but I think the sheriff wants to hit that point. And do you want to step in on that? Sure.
I just want to make sure that's real clear.
Yeah, that's our last point. So with this levy, it is just a renewal. It's no reduction in services. There's no reduction in staffing or anything like that. Some of the things that my office has been able to do are up here on the screen, and I think you have them maybe in your packet. But and like the DA said, we are just safer. More people being taken off the road that shouldn't be there, more people being held accountable for things that we weren't able to do before. And so there's so many good things that our levy has been able to produce. It's to the point where we don't want to see that go away. I'll just run through these real quick. So one thing that is vital part of this levy is that because we have this funding, we're able to do some extra things that are crucial. One of those things is our mobile crisis response team, and it's a position where a deputy and a mental health clinician are paired together in a car, going out and responding to calls. This is a partner. We're in partnership with the Salem Police Department. They also have a team that works in West Salem and the rest of Polk County when we're not working. So they'll go anywhere, and so do we, and that's 7 days a week. And we wouldn't be able to do things like this if we didn't have this levy. Our drug team, since they came back, it's been 2 years, over 200 arrests and convictions, 11 pounds of meth and heroin. So these folks are very active as well all throughout the county. Did you mention the 800? We'd like to throw out just a couple stats just to show volume of what we're doing, and that's with the DA's office is a good one.
This is a stat we like to talk about, the 800 more prosecutions per year, and that's directly as a result of not only having the bandwidth in terms of the number of prosecutors I have, but it's also when people are aware that there is law enforcement out there, they're more inclined to make that call to report crimes happening when they see them. A real problem that we had prior to the last levy passing in 2015, people felt there was no point in calling. We had documented cases when people said, why should I call? No one's going to come. Well, since Sheriff Garton's been able to return to 24-hour patrols, there's a real sense in the community that when they call, they will get a response. And so with that, people have been more willing to call. There's more arrests being made, more stops. So that results in more prosecutions and us being able to follow through with that. So that's where we get a number of 800 more prosecutions per year than we were able to do. We have more prosecutors able to complete the prosecutions than we were to before, and we just have more volume coming in per year, per month than we did before. That's where a statistic comes like that has been developed. But there's another piece as well. Our results don't come in simply in prosecuting people, putting them in the jail, and holding people accountable that way. There's another component to this as well, which is crime prevention programs. Having the bandwidth for us to be able to be involved in programs like drug court, mental health court, multidisciplinary teams, which intervene with people and take them off the street and get them into treatment programs, which really target their specific needs, which prevent people from getting back in the street and committing crimes again. We were able to be involved in those programs in ways we simply weren't able to be before when we were in a triage function. And that's been extremely meaningful and effective as well. Again, safety isn't just an abstract concept. It's very, very real to us. And being able to work with those populations is extremely meaningful and effective for people in our community as well. And we've seen that in our numbers in the reduced recidivism of those people involved in the drug courts, in the mental health programs as well. So that's something that, because of the levy, we've been able to have the bandwidth to place programs, place prosecutors in those programs, and I've seen it work. I can testify to that. I'm personally chosen to be the drug court prosecutor right now because I wanted to get my hands in the clay and see what's happening with those programs myself. So that's an important component, and along with the mental health crisis team, it's allowed us to develop those programs and work hand in hand with the city police, and I'm glad to see Chief Moore here. He's been a real leader in helping us in those programs as well. So that team effort is something that we've really been able to participate in ways that we weren't able to without the levy passing. So we really don't want to go back to the way it was prior to 2015.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Sheriff and Mr. District Attorney, for coming down tonight. Just to clarify, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking voters to just maintain the status quo, maintain the current service level, and maintain their current level of taxes. You're not asking for an increase. This would just maintain everything the way they basically follow through on the commitment they made a few years ago. Is that right?
Essentially, except for the fact that they're lowering the cap to 2.5 cents, so 42.5 cents would be the cap. 5-year in length and no reduction in services, and it actually increases. I would get an employee, a deputy on patrol in the first year, and then I would also, if needed, get one in between year 3 and 4, just because our call load is so high and it's just increasing, just population's increasing, so it gives me that ability. It would replace the 5th year, so the 5th year in the first levy would stop. There wouldn't be any double taxing or anything like that. This would start in the 5th year, basically, of the first levy, and then the first levy would go away. So, in reality, because the cap is down, we may or may not get timber funding. We never know really if that comes in. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So that's why, on average, the taxes have been 33 cents per thousand. But again, we've kept it under what we promised we were going to keep it under, and we'll keep doing that. That's my promise to all of you.
Lyle, did you want to?
Yeah.
I just want to say, City of Salem's got the finest police department I've ever seen. And now I've got to tour Sheriff Garton's, and I tell you what, it is first class also. He runs a really tight, organized ship, has the best attitude, all of his police officers and deputies along. And DA Felton, same thing. He's involved in so many different aspects. It's just not locking him up, it's also preventing him from coming back. So that's why I'm here to support him.
Could you identify yourself just for that?
Lyle Morhorst, Polk County Commissioner.
Great, thank you very much. All right.
I would just say that I really do appreciate the few minutes and the ask for all of you to support as a council this endeavor because it's essential. So.
Okay, and I'll just alert the council, I'll be bringing back a motion for endorsement of this levy at our next meeting, rather than take it up tonight. So we'll take it up when we have it written out. Everybody can get a look at it, okay? And if they want to contact, if any counselor wants to contact you, obviously any member of the public, just call you at the courthouse. Is that the best way to catch you?
I always answer phones or emails, so yes, for me.
Very good.
Email, phone, it's perfect. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Same. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, council city manager comments. Okay, very good. Public comments. Jamie French.
Aye.
Jamie, you have 3 minutes, and the light turns orange when there's 1 minute left, and then when it turns red, time's up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jamie French, the current chair of the Salem Landmarks Commission. I'm happy to be here tonight to share with you some of the exciting work that the Commission has been doing. You'll find more accomplishments in our annual report and work plan, which you should have or will have soon. And I just wanted to share with you some of the highlights from that. We have just opened our 5th annual This Place Matters Historic Photo Contest. We are accepting photos through April 10th. We are continuing our Toolbox Grant Program, which has provided $70,000 to local historic property owners since 2011. And archaeology is playing a much stronger role in our current program. Last year, we hosted our first 2 public archaeology open houses, one at the new police facility and one at the Salem Pioneer Cemetery. We also put on the first Qing Ming Festival in over 70 years in the city of Salem at the Pioneer Cemetery. The HLC just wanted me to pass along our appreciation for your support for historic preservation in Salem.
You guys are doing a great job, just a great job. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you very much for coming down and for your service as chair. I read the report. It's terrific. It's very informative. And one of my neighborhood groups is Cessna, and you've been doing a whole lot of work with Cessna, and I appreciate it, and I know they do too. And I also went to the ceremony at the Pioneer ceremony, and that was terrific as well. So thank you for the work you've done, and keep up the good work.
Councilor Kaiser?
Yeah, I want to echo those comments. I think the Historical Landmarks Commission is my favorite commission. I'm not biased in any way, but I think the work that you're doing is really great, and especially the archaeology. I think it's been the one cultural resource that the public just doesn't know as much about it, and with that, especially with the police site and displaying the things that were found and interpreting them is just amazing, as well as the Pioneer Cemetery and the Chinese artifacts that were found there. So yeah, keep up the great work.
I had a chance to participate in the Chinese cemetery as well. That was really a great event. I hope we're doing it again this year.
Yes.
Great. That was really inspiring thing to do. Thank you. And by the way, your work in the neighborhoods really continues to pay off for this community and in downtown. So thank you again. Jackie?
When is the next festival? Do you have a date yet?
I believe they just picked a date. It'll be around the beginning of April. I don't have the specific date, but Kimberly Fitzgerald will definitely forward that along to you guys.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, then. Ends public comment on issues on the agenda, the consent calendar then.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar with the following poll. Item 3.3A by Councilor Cook.
Second.
Second by Cook.
The consent calendar includes the minutes from the February 11th, 2019 City Council meeting and a grant amendment for final construction payment on the Peter Courtney Minto Island Bicycle and Pedestrian Bridge and request authorization for Division Street funding. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we have a couple of public hearings tonight. Oh, missed one? Okay.
The City Council will now conduct a public hearing for the purpose of reviewing the Planning Commission's decision approving Class 3 design review, Class 3 site plan review, Class 2 driveway approach permit, tree regulation variance case number DR SPR DAP TRV 18-07 for proposed development of a 111-unit apartment complex with frontage on Wiltsey Road and Candyflower Court Southeast. The criteria applicable to the decision are SRC 225.005E2, 220.005F3, 804.025D, and 808.045D. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. A failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue shall preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by testimony from the following. The applicant is limited to 10 minutes. Neighborhood associations are limited to 5 minutes. Other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes, and the applicant's rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 1 minute remains, and a red light will appear when your time is expired. Please conclude your testimony when the red light appears.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Aaron Panko with the Community Development Department. Tonight's case is for a design review, site plan review, driveway approach permit, and tree regulation. It's case number 18-07. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments. We did receive a revised grading plan and some public comment that's included in your agenda also as well. The proposal includes development of a new 111-unit multifamily apartment complex. The consolidated application includes a Class 3 design review addressing the multifamily design guidelines, a Class 3 site plan review application to review the development standards of the Unified Development Code, a Class 2 driveway approach permit for driveways on Wiltsey Road Southeast and Candyflower Court Southeast, and a tree regulation variance request to remove 4 Oregon white oaks that are greater than 24 inches in diameter and are considered significant trees. This is a vicinity map of the subject property. The property is approximately 6.5 acres in size. The property has frontage along Wiltsey Road Southeast to the south. On the yellow line there is a street classification that's a collector street. The property is also along South Commercial. Commercial is designated as a major arterial. The property is split zoned. The lighter color on the north side of the property is a multifamily RM1 designation. This is a lighter density multifamily designation. And to the south is a higher density RM2 multifamily designation. The abutting property to the east shares that same split density pattern. This was developed a few years back with an apartment complex. To the north is an existing single-family residential subdivision. And to the west, we have 2 different commercial zoning designations. And this is an aerial photo of the property. The property currently contains a single-family dwelling, and there are several existing trees throughout the property. Now, the orientation here of the site plan has changed a little bit from what you saw on those. So the north is now facing towards the left. So Wiltsey Road is to the right side of the screen here. The site layout includes 10 buildings. 9 of them are multifamily buildings. 1 is a recreation and office building. The site has access to Wiltsey Road. This is the main driveway entrance into the property. There's a secondary emergency access that's proposed further to the east along Wiltsey. And there will also be access to a public street. This is Candy Flower Court. That would be on the north side of the property. This is a photo taken from the east side of the property, looking west towards a stand of trees that's on the property, near that property line on the west side. And we have another photo of the site. This shows Wiltsey Road, and there's an existing row of trees that's right along Wiltsey Road. These are in the future right-of-way for Wiltsey Road. So when the street is widened and the sidewalks are added, this row of trees will be removed. So Chapter 808 is our tree preservation ordinance, and it provides protections for certain trees in city limits. There are 5 significant trees on this property which are protected by Chapter 808. The applicant has requested a tree regulation variance to remove 4 of the significant trees, and the location of the trees that are proposed for removal are shown there in red. The applicant explains that the physical characteristics of the property, including grade, the public utility easements on the site, create hardships in developing the site in a way that would preserve all the significant trees and also meet minimum dwelling unit density, multifamily design standards, and off-street parking requirements. This shows the conceptual landscape plan that was provided by the applicant. The plan shows one significant tree that's highlighted in the green will be preserved and incorporated into the open space area. At the time of building permit application, the applicant is required to submit a final landscape plan that shows the location of all existing trees to be preserved. And this photo here shows the revised grading plan that was provided by the applicant. The remaining trees on the property that are not significant trees are not protected by city code, and all of these trees may be removed without a permit or without a variance. There is, however, a requirement that 2 additional trees be replanted for each existing mature tree removed from a setback area, and for each tree that's removed from a development site in excess of 75%. A determination of compliance with our tree replanting requirement is made during building permit application when the applicant will provide a final landscape plan for review. We didn't receive any public testimony during the first comment period, and no comments were received at Planning Commission. Like I mentioned, we did receive the 1 public comment tonight that's included in the record. And staff is recommending that the City Council affirm the decision of the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Aaron. The applicant, Mr. Grenz, are you the applicant? Representing the applicant?
I'm as good as you get tonight.
Okay.
My technical assistant here will get me with my exhibits for tonight. So.
Yes, how long? You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my name is Mark Grenz, and I'm with Multitech Engineering, and our office is at 1155 13th Street Southeast here in Salem, and we're representing the applicant in this project here before you this evening. This site is, as staff kind of outlined, and if you've looked this up, has a lot of elements to it that made it a little bit difficult to set this project up and achieve the kind of efficiency that we like to get on a site. A site this size, we would normally get somewhere close to 140 units in here using the common layout practices that we do. But this site has several constraints to it. And I'll use my pointer on this one, but I can point this one. Maybe this one's, everybody can see on this one. So we have a fairly large City of Salem sanitary sewer easement that runs through this site. It has 2.
You're going to have to figure out how to talk and get to the...
All right, I can do that.
Okay.
So this has the fairly significant sanitary sewer easement that runs through. There's 2 major force mains that come through here that service the Battle Creek pump station out here, so they limit the things that we would be able to do within that portion. It has the termination of the Candy Flower Street in here, which we've terminated as a cul-de-sac in order to complete the public improvements that are necessary to satisfy public works standards for that. There's a significant stormwater facility that we constructed down in here several years ago for all the multifamily that was created up above. That's being utilized in order to meet the stormwater detention and limit runoff requirements from this. We have set aside an area for a significant stormwater treatment facility that's needed to meet this requirement. And so what we had left was this part that's got a fairly good amount of topography in it. And the topography makes other challenges for us because all these multifamily projects that we create have to meet the fair housing standards for accessibility. And that means we have to be able to make provisions for pedestrians to maneuver on the site and to get to all the units and get to all the common facilities and get out to the public right away. So that begins to limit what we can achieve with grading and other things. So this is the site plan that we took to the Planning Commission. There was confusion in the findings that we wrote in terms of the number of trees that we were going to be able to save. We committed at the Planning Commission meeting that we would make an effort to retain as many trees on the site as we could, and committed that the staff report stated that there would only be one retained, but that wasn't true. But we committed to do that, and so we turned back to staff a revised grading plan that shows that we're now retaining 12%. In addition to that, we passed out before you this evening another site plan where we worked with our client and got him to agree to give us a little bit more latitude of some of the criteria that he had for the site. And we were able to reconfigure some of the elements on the site that has allowed us to, if you recall, that staff pointed out there was 5 significant trees on this site, of which we were retaining one, which the one, by the way, is the very large, the 60-inch one. With this site plan, that's the large 60-inch one that's there. We've now been able to retain 3 more of the significant oak trees. We were able to reconstruct the way access is provided here and create a large island large enough to be able to retain the 30-inch oak tree that's in that. We shifted our building configurations around and were able to, and moved one of our open space areas here, and were able to, and adjusted our sidewalk
Could you talk into the mic again?
And we were able to retain two more of the significant oak trees. So there's only one oak tree that's left on there that's just too difficult. It sits kind of right in the middle of the parking lot. It's too difficult for us to retain, but we were able to come up with a plan that our client was satisfied with that would allow us to retain 3 more of those. We checked our grading plan and our grading provisions for accessibility and made sure that we would be able to not do any significant grading around those in the area of those trees either that would further jeopardize them. So we would propose this site plan before the council tonight as a way to increase the number of significant trees that we can retain on this site. In addition, we're also working, as we made a commitment to the Planning Commission and also here, to retain as many more trees as we could. We are refining as we get into the final designs of this project, we are able to refine our grading plan a little bit more, and we think there's going to be some more trees that we'll be able to retain on here. The site suffers badly from what you see today if you drive by it, because it has that significant large stand of fir trees that line Wiltsey Road, and they sit right on the right-of-way line. And of course, with the public works standards, we're building a property line sidewalk along there. So it puts the sidewalk right next to the right-of-way line, and a lot of those trees are right in that area, so it makes it difficult to retain very many of those, if any at all. We know there's some that are on the site. We've highlighted those in green that are on our tree preservation plan now to be retained. And we're comfortable with all the trees that we have told staff we can save, and we think we can increase that. So right now we're at about 15%, and we think we can shove that up more. So I think that's the issue that council was most concerned about on this. I think all the other aspects, we didn't try to maximize density on this site. You know, we're 111 units. We got a lot of open area, a lot of parking, a lot of things that we feel we need in order to be able to help, help make this fit within the area there. I don't know that there's anybody in this council, Mr. Nanke might have been, but when the city did the Smurfle analysis way back when, so this was one of the pieces that council chose to bring in order to provide an area for increased density that would take place. And so this piece, along with the properties that showed that are already developed, were heavily treed, and but that was council's choices of when you're trying to decide whose area and what to do, that it was pretty clear that it was going to be difficult to retain all those trees with the multifamily densities that staff and council were trying to achieve with that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have of me.
So, Mr. Grenz, I want to make sure I understand then what you're proposing here. You're proposing a new condition to retain 4 white oaks.
Correct.
4 of the 5 white oaks.
That's correct.
And you're also proposing a second condition to maintain at least 15% of the existing trees.
With the addition of those, with the trees that we've shown on our plan to be retained, that what staff gave to you in your packet originally, plus with the addition of the white oaks, we commit to save at least 15% of the trees on this site.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Cook.
Thank you for your presentation tonight, Mr. Grenz. So with the amendment that you brought tonight with the 15% of additional trees retained and the 4 out of 5 significant white oaks, are you also committed to the replanting rate in
Yes.
the original proposal as well?
Yeah, no problem. We understood that would be a requirement and knew, and that's always the downside of sites that have lots of trees is the replanting requirement that you have to do. So,
If I may, just one more question. So what changed? I know in the original application, it was, we have these standards that came through that were set by council about tree retention, about priorities that we've set in the community. And the original application was, we just can't do this, it's impossible. So there seems to be a significant difference between 1 and now we've got 15% and the 4 out of 5 trees. What changed?
well, the original application, the narrative in the original application was incorrect in that the way our tree preservation plan was noted, there were more than 1 tree that was being retained. It just that wasn't what the narrative said. The narrative said that we were removing all but 1, but that wasn't the way. That wasn't what we were doing. But the way the narrative got prepared, that was incorrect. So
Who prepared the narrative?
my office did. So we erred in that. And then since that time, what we did was we talked to our client and in order to be able to make these reviews, we got our client to agree that, for instance, that it wasn't critical to have parking in front of the common building recreation space, that we could adjust that. We did a little bit more refining of our our site planning, and shifted our buildings around, and still could make that work on the site and make all the ADA work, and we're able to then retain those other 2 oak trees that were there. So they were refinements that we made as we continued to move through the course, that we, based on the criteria that we set out with in the beginning, we didn't see it that way.
And was there any cost benefit or cost analysis that was done with these additional changes, or is the margin still the same with these amendments?
Well, the cost to the project remains fairly the same, but there was a loss of parking spaces that would take place. And it does require us to be a little bit more cautious in how we conduct our grading in here in order to be able to make sure that we protect those trees.
Councilor Anderson?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor asked most of my questions, so that's good, but a follow-up questions from Councilor Cook. It sounds like one of the 3 more oak trees that can be retained is in front of the community center.
That's in that green circle.
Right,
so
the
we
green
created
circle in
that.
front of the building.
That's correct.
One of the new oaks that can retain. Good, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Any questions for staff? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just
Councilor
want
Lewis.
to, Mr. Grant, want to verify that you're not losing the ability to construct 111 units.
No, it didn't cost us any units. It cost us parking spaces. And we just reconfigured the way we had the units set up on the site in order to make sure we could provide a safe construction distance around those other 2 oak trees. So,
Are you still meeting your parking requirement?
yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Young?
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a question kind of to follow up on Councilor Cook. She had asked specifically, based on the original application, were you going to, because of saving the about 15% trees versus only 1 tree, will the replant rate actually be based on that original application then, or will you be changing how many trees you replant?
We'll be replanting the trees based on the ratio that staff established based on the number of trees to take out, which I think is 2 to 1 for them. So we're taking out less trees because we were able to save trees, but we will replant at the same ratio of 2 to 1. I don't know if that was, I think that was I'm not asking for any variation in the ratio. We'll replant at 2 to 1.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Oh,
Sorry.
Councilor Cook.
Sorry. So now we have just 1 out of the 5 oaks that still, it's just going to be really tricky to do. And that's what you're asking for the variance on, is that correct?
That's correct.
A significant white oak.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Yes.
A few more, another question I actually had, 'cause I was looking at the revised map that was on our desk, and I remember in the original application, you had put that there was supposed to be a playground of some sorts. Is it still on the plan, or has that been removed?
The playground, the playground that's the open space area that we have left that we're going to create one of our recreation areas is now moved over here where those oak trees were. My pointer's not working right. So we moved that. We still have our sports court proposed in here, and we have this here.
Mr. Brand, you're going to have to talk into that mic.
And and then there's another recreational site proposed on the site that's not shown on. Maybe I can go back.
Okay.
We have another recreational site that's located up here, as well, a tot lot that we have set up in here that's fenced off for play equipment to go in.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have no other members of the public. You want to keep questioning?
Yeah, I have a few more questions, I'm sorry.
Okay. Keep asking them.
Okay.
Come on down, Mr.
Sorry.
Kranz. Councilor Young has more questions.
So you had mentioned that all the fir trees that are lined on Wiltsey will be removed, or most of them will be.
There's the ones that are set back that are off of the property line, the right-of-way line on our property will be able to retain, but those that are right on either on our side, just on our side of the right-of-way line, or just on the other side of the right-of-way line, will be impacted by the sidewalk. If we were constructing a curb line sidewalk in that area, it's likely that we would be able to retain a few more of those trees along there, but with the public works requirement for a property line walk, it will impact those trees too significantly to save any other than those that are set back off the line a little ways.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're done. Any questions for Mr. Penko? Okay. Yeah.
The question to clarify with staff, the grading plan that was added doesn't appear to show the trees that they're now proposing to retain. At least as far as I can tell, do you have enough detail from the proposals that have been submitted tonight to determine which trees they're saving now? Or do you need more detail from them?
So we haven't had an opportunity to review this plan that shows the additional 3 significant trees being preserved. We were provided a revised grading plan that had essentially the same site layout, but showed some additional trees. So this is new. We haven't had a chance to evaluate this.
In addition, Norman Wright, Community Development Director, while I certainly applaud the creativity here, there's other factors here that we're going to have to be able to verify, whether it's, say, Lisa just brought up a very good one, turning radius for the trucks, like fire trucks, for example, around the proposed roundabout, as well as verifying everything that would be involved in, say, parking requirements, et cetera. So yeah, there's not been enough time.
What's that mean then? What are you suggesting?
Hi, Lisa Anderson-Olvey. If the applicant could extend the 120 days, we could review it and come back at the next council meeting, write up the proposed conditions that Mr. Grenz suggested, and let you know if there's any other concerns from city staff or from planning review of the revised plan.
Okay.
Yeah, we would be happy to, to provide staff with a full-size drawing electronic copy of this. We apologize for springing that on you, but we finished our analysis today on this to have it for this evening. And then we don't have any problem extending the 120 days to allow staff a chance to do this. We part of what we tried to accomplish on this was to make sure that fire would have adequate maneuvering space on here, and that they don't have to maneuver around that roundabout. They don't have to turn around it because they have other ways to get to all the units. They got the Candyflower Court, they got our main entrance that comes in and turns up, and then they got full access into the center of the site.
Hopefully that'll be worked out with our staff, and
But-
then this
so
will
anyway,
come back to us with a certification by them that you have achieved what you're describing.
Anyway, we're happy to work with them on it.
Okay, great. So we have a commitment from you that we have 120 days extra to go on this.
My staff will provide that to Lisa's group, and we'll provide a written extension. Is that 2 weeks? Is it 2 weeks till you come back?
So depending on whether you close the hearing tonight or continue it, we may need an extension through the end of March to get the written decision back to council for adoption.
Would it be faster to close it and then open it, or faster to leave it open?
Well, if you want to continue the hearing, there's a potential that it gets extended further. So if you close the hearing and keep the record open, that may shorten it down a bit.
Okay.
But we're probably going to need an extension through March if that's acceptable to the applicant.
Okay, we'll extend it.
Okay, great. Okay. So what do we gotta do? Close this thing?
Yeah, close the hearing, keep the record open.
Okay. I'm going to, without objection, I'm going to close the hearing, keep the record open, and we'll...
And the record will be...
Mayor,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I think Mr. Dalton wanted to speak.
Mr. Dalton wasn't on my list, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. He's kind of getting closer and closer to the microphone, so.
Anybody else wants to testify?
Yeah, come on up, Bill.
Thanks. Before the clock starts ticking, could I...
As soon as you start talking. No, go ahead.
I wanted to get a copy of my testimony. I had communicated earlier on a more personal basis.
Could you give to the recorder, please?
Should I give that up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's already in our...
Yeah, he just needs to give a copy to her. I don't know what he's doing. Okay, Bill, let's go ahead and you can present your testimony.
On personal communications, I tend to be a little more loquacious, but this is boiled down to one page, which is what I always try to do if I'm going to testify.
Good.
So I apologize for the confusion I may have created for some of the council members. Basically, since I've tried to state in both my earlier personal communication with some of the council and then the handout that I now have for the entire council and the mayor, There were a number of concerns, and I'm a little bit shaky today. This is relatively recent. It didn't come up in any of the neighborhood association meetings I attended, and I just came across this material on Saturday and was out there taking a look at the property and taking pictures in the rain, and I tried to pull something together as best I could. But happily, I think a lot of the issues have been addressed. One is I want to commend the council for bringing this to a public testimony rather than just rubber stamping the staff report. I saw the original staff report. I have not seen the revisions. As a citizen of Salem, I was absolutely appalled to be reading a proposal for removing 320 out of 321 trees, especially after I had a chance to look at the parcel. A lot of these trees are along the border. I'm not familiar with the plans for Wiltsey. I can only hope that at some point the city and the developer could work together to protect some of those trees. They are literally gorgeous trees. I want to commend the developer for the efforts that have been made to try and respond to what I don't know. I saw the papers that were proposed. I saw the city staff approval of a plan, and then I come here today and I find myself wanting to commend the developer. This again leaves me doing a 360, but my commendation comes from the heart. I think there is an effort, and I appreciate those efforts. The main question I'm left with is, I still can't understand, after the Costco debacle was still in the middle of, after this proposal, I have no idea how the city staff is representing my city. I read the codes, I read the guidelines, I read the banner up there about us being a Tree City USA. There is absolutely no consistency between the things the planning staff and the Planning Commission approve and what I understand to be the efforts and direction of this city. I can only hope that the council and the mayor and the city manager somehow address this issue very cogently sometime in the near future. I just don't think it's fair to the citizens or the council members or the developers to have to constantly go through trying to interpret what things like have to.
Thanks, Bill, very much. Time's up.
Thank you very much.
Before we close the record, I just wanted to clarify if any members of council had ex-parte contacts with any members of the public regarding the application. Now is the time to disclose them.
I received an email from Mr. Dalton earlier, and I had forwarded it to the city attorney's office before the meeting.
Thank you, and that's been added to the record.
Thank you, that was all.
Okay, yeah.
The same, I had also received the email and I had forwarded. There was also another email that was sent, I thought it was sent to the entire council. It was from Bill, starts with an F, Fuji. He also had sent in an email, but I don't see that
Listed in this record.
In what was that?
In the record.
Yeah, I don't see that in the records.
Did you send it to the city attorney?
I thought that one went to all the city council.
Yeah, it doesn't, I think it's important, we'll have a discussion again at some future date to explain ex parte contact and how to communicate these emails you're receiving to the city to be part of the record, which means you've got to send them in to the city attorney when you identify them.
I have the same concern that Jackie did. I received an email from both Bill and, well, both Bills, I guess, Fuji and Dalton, but I thought they were addressed to the entire council as well. Usually, there's just been a lot of email exchange, so of course we want to make sure they're folded. But that contact, that I'm still able to remain impartial with those, and I wanted to make sure they were on the record.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, I received the email as well from Mr. Fuji. I just looked at it. I had not forwarded it because it did go to the entire city council. And I had understood that if they go to the city council address, we don't have to forward those?
Generally speaking, you don't. Apparently we missed that one, so.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and it is to the city council overall address.
We'll add that to the record.
Do you want to speak? Okay. Okay, I have one more person. Angelina, you want to?
All right, I guess I'm getting really familiar here if I'm going first name now.
It's the name tag. No, I was kidding.
All right, so I came to speak about the new development. I heard some people in the community, disparage the big 3-story apartment complexes, but we don't have enough space to house everyone in small apartment complexes. As much as I love the city look of all the small apartment complexes that fit in with the neighborhoods, if we keep on that same path, we won't have room. We just won't. We have to build up. As for the number of trees that are coming down in this one, it's quite concerning, especially the big row. I'm just wondering why you can't put the sidewalk behind the trees instead of chopping them all down. And also, any place that there's not a building or a parking space, I think they should leave the trees as much as possible and build around it. But I definitely encourage us to look at maybe building more apartment complexes that look like large houses that have the apartments, configured inside them. We already have a whole bunch of those houses in Salem right now, and they work really well, and they create a sense of community inside that one place instead of these big apartment complexes where you barely know who your neighbors are. But that doesn't make this plan bad. This is a normal apartment complexes, and we need it. We need it badly. We need more development in Salem because we've already run out of room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else from the public that wants to speak on this? Okay, Mr. Grenz, do you want to do any rebuttal? Okay, very good. I'm going to close the public hearing and hold the record open until March 11th at 5 p.m. Okay. And we'll open our next hearing.
City Council will now conduct a public hearing to receive public testimony regarding updates to the system development charge methodologies for parks, transportation, water, wastewater, and stormwater. Individuals are limited to 3 minutes of testimony. A yellow light will appear at the podium when 1 minute remains, and a red light will appear when your time has expired. Please conclude your testimony when the red light appears.
Go ahead.
Hey. Good evening, Mayor Bennett and councilors. My name is Glenn Davis. I'm the Chief Development Engineer in the Public Works Department. I'm here to explain a proposed update to Salem's 5 existing system development charge methodologies. The council agenda actually includes 3 items related to this hearing. Agenda item 4B is a public hearing and resolution adopting the methodology report. Agenda item 6D is an information report regarding promulgation of administrative rules. And then agenda item 7.1A is an ordinance amending applicable sections of the Salem Revised Code. I'll open my presentation with a kind of a high-level overview of system development charges, or SDCs, as you'll hear. When a building permit is issued, SDCs are collected for 5 different types of infrastructure. The money collected for parks SDCs is used to pay for parks facilities that are needed to serve new development, and the same applies for transportation and water and wastewater and stormwater. So as these SDCs are collected, one building at a time, those revenues become a significant source of funding that's used to construct these new facilities. So next I'll explain the regulatory background briefly. Oregon Revised Statute Chapter 223 authorizes collection of SDCs for these 5 types of infrastructure. And the state law includes a number of definitions, and it also includes the methodology process that then feeds our local code, Chapter 41 of our Salem Revised Code. And these just enact the local implementation of state law, and also there's some exemptions that are specific to our local code related to low-income housing projects, and then pre-existing development are 2 primary ones. What this means is if you're building a qualified low-income housing project, you actually are exempted from paying any SDCs at all. And then pre-existing development, the exemption means that if you demolish a home and build another home, then there's no SDC charged. So, although it's not required as any part of the methodology process, we formed a committee called the SDC Methodology Committee, representing a number of stakeholders in the community. We had committee meetings, and agendas were posted on the city's website, and the meetings were recorded. The committee met 18 times over 17 months and made a final recommendation in November of 2018. There was a unanimous recommendation with one exception, which I will explain here in a minute. I'd actually like to personally thank the committee members. I think 6 of the 7 are here tonight, if I see them correctly. Councilor Anderson was the committee chair. Other members were Richard Berger, Russ Beaton, Mike Erdman, Rich Fry, Bill Fuji, and former Councilor McCoy. So they put in many, many hours toward this important endeavor, and their input was invaluable to the process. So the adoption process concludes with our public hearing tonight. State law requires that notice be sent 90 days in advance, and that the draft methodology is made available 60 days prior to this hearing. So we sent a 90-day notice and a 60-day notice to all neighborhood associations and other interested parties. We've also included a question and answer style information page on the city's website to explain the methodology. So tonight's hearing is the last step in this adoption process by a resolution of council. So I'll now attempt to explain the basic elements of an SDC methodology. And the methodology in its most basic form is this equation. I'm an engineer, so I like equations. Growth costs divided by growth units are equal to costs per unit of growth. So growth costs are established through a project list that tabulates the infrastructure costs needed to serve the future growth. These costs are limited only to the portions of the projects that provide additional capacity for new growth and not for maintenance or replacement of failing systems. So for insiders, these project lists are actually called 309 lists because the state regulation has the 309 suffix. So growth units are a 20-year approximation of the impacts that are caused by development, and these growth units are dwelling units generally for parks, vehicle trips for transportation, water meters for water and wastewater, and impervious surface area for stormwater. And then the cost per unit of growth is ultimately depicted in what you see in fee tables, so that these SDC amounts in the tables are what developers pay when they pay for building permits in these fee tables. So now I'm going to emphasize some of the major policy changes that are being implemented with this new methodology. First, accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, are being exempted for a trial period of 5 years, beginning in July of 2019. ADUs are small dwelling units that are either attached to or detached from a primary dwelling. The current methodology for parks looks at an individual park location. The policy change, and the existing methodology establishes a ratio between the developed and undeveloped land within the park service area, and this is the change that I want to explain. So in the current methodology, you see the area that's in blue is undeveloped in my hypothetical example, and the area in red is developed. So that in my example here, the ratio of undeveloped to developed is 75% undeveloped and 25% developed. In our current methodology, then, this ratio becomes the eligibility ratio. So the SDC would be 75% eligible, and 25% would have to come from other funding. So citywide, then, every park has a unique ratio of funding between SDCs and non-SDCs. So every park has to have split funding. And this is a significant problem because there is very limited funding from the non-SDC portions. So often, development of parks is delayed because we await grants or gifts or other SDC, non-SDC sources of funding. So the new methodology changes this policy by making all parks 100% eligible up to a maximum limit of park acreage. So all the parks on the list are eligible 100% because the total acreage of parks citywide is restricted. So parks not on the list are generally in more established neighborhoods, and they can be acquired and developed through the non-SDC funds. So that's the first major change to the parks methodology. Another one I want to mention is the non-residential employee use of parks. So the current parks methodology only charges SDCs to residential developments only. This methodology that we're proposing adds a park SDC for non-residential projects, and they currently do not pay parks SDCs today. So neighborhood parks, which are our smallest parks, are located in primarily residential areas, and they're not planned generally for employee use, they're generally residential use. Regional data, though, shows that our larger parks are used at a ratio of about 4 employees to 10 residents. So the non-residential SDC in this methodology is based on this 4 resident per 4 employee ratio, and only in the larger parks. So that's how those fees were calculated in the methodology. Next to transportation. Transportation has a similar issue when it comes to non-SDC funding, as it does with parks. And I'll explain that here in a similar format. So like parks, each street project in the current methodology has a unique ratio of SDC eligibility. So most projects require a component of SDC and non-SDC funding. So this split funding is often a problem because non-SDC transportation funds are quite limited. So the new transportation methodology lists all the projects on the 309 list as 100% eligible, with a few exceptions. So there's no match that's mandatory as part of the methodology for most projects. But I will point out there's an administrative rule listed in agenda item 6D, and that actually does establish limitations for how developers can be credited for street improvements that are done in conjunction with the development projects. And city-built projects do not have such a limitation. Another characteristic of the new transportation methodology is that there is a clear nexus now in our methodology between how much the community has paid for major street improvements and how much developers are required to pay for street improvements through SDCs. And I'm going to explain that one as well. So you'll recall this equation, that the most basic equation here is growth cost divided by growth units is equal to cost per unit of growth. Well, the new transportation methodology uses the same equation to establish the non-growth funding of transportation projects. So this equation establishes an equivalent amount of non-growth funding to quantify how much the rest of the community is paying for transportation for major projects. So I'll explain how this analysis works. So we tabulated 20 years worth of non-SDC funding in transportation for 20 years based on current dollars is $280 million. Then we calculated the average daily trips citywide based on some target years here on the screen. And I'm going to use this slide to point out that this is the one area where the committee did not receive unanimous consent. So the 7-member committee had a 4-3 vote on this issue. The majority selected year 2008 as the target year to establish the non-growth units, and the minority selected year 1998. Either option is defensible. It's really just a policy choice. So those numbers from the previous slide are then placed into the equation, and we come up with $399 per average daily trip. So by comparison, the minority option, as we discussed, has a cost per trip of $463 per trip. And for those who aren't familiar with the term average daily trip, a new single-family home creates between 9 and 10 average daily trips. So the cost difference for a new single-family home between those two options is about $600. So back to our majority opinion, $399 per trip of non-growth represents how much the community has paid for major transportation projects, non-growth, non-SDC. So this methodology then takes that non-growth cost and establishes that cost as the growth cost. So the growth cost per unit then becomes $399 per ADT in the majority opinion. And so by using this approach, the developers will pay the same amount toward transportation as the rest of the community has been paying. So I'll reference also that the current cost per unit of growth is $204 per trip, So this new methodology, for the majority opinion, approximately doubles the prior SDC for transportation. A couple final points related to water and wastewater. This methodology repeals an outdated type of fee called a connection fee that was established prior to invention of SDCs. These fee amounts have been incorporated into the SDC fee structure. And then lastly, I want to mention something about area-based fees. The methodology charges one fee for the entire city without any area-based distinctions. The city currently has in place two primary mechanisms to address localized infrastructure needs separate from SDC funding. Temporary access fees pay for a proportional share of a future project yet to be built. Reimbursement district fees pay a proportional share of past projects that have already been built. And this funding approach allows for the SDCs for home builders to be kept as low as possible while still having adequate funding for area-based infrastructure needs over and above SDCs. So I'll close by giving some examples of some project types to show how the SDCs are proposed to change. First on the screen is a single-family dwelling. As we see in the red here, there's a small increase to water and wastewater because of the change in the connection fee, repealing those connection fees. The Parks SDCs goes down slightly for single-family because the costs are no longer paid only by residential, but are also shared with non-residential. So for the because of that shift that actually reduced the single-family parks. Excuse me. Back. The transportation fees double under the majority and go slightly over double for the minority. And then the stormwater is unchanged. And it's unchanged because the stormwater master plan has been unchanged since the original methodology. And the plan is that the stormwater master plan is scheduled to be adopted here within the next year. And then once we have that additional data available from the new methodology, then that would allow us to reconsider the stormwater SDC. So the sum total for a single-family home is a difference of $2,000 for the majority option or $2,500 for the minority, roughly. My next example is a multifamily complex, 180-unit complex. Again, water and wastewater go up slightly. Parks actually goes up a little bit because the census data for multifamily is actually higher occupancy rates than it had been in the prior methodology. Transportation, again, doubles, and stormwater is unchanged. And so I show there about a 29% increase for that project, which is about $1,500 per unit for the majority choice, which is less than 2 months' rent for most new units. But I will also add for a low housing income unit, low income housing unit, there would be no fee for that unit under this methodology, and the last one. And my last example is an 82-room hotel. We again have a slight increase in water and wastewater fees. Parks now is a factor that hadn't been before. Transportation is again doubled. And so here we see a substantial increase in the SDCs for that example, but yet then it's approximately $1,900 per room, which is less than 1 month's rent for most hotel rooms. So in conclusion, the fees are being implemented in 2 phases. We're proposing a 50% increase here effective July 1st of this year, and then full implementation July of next year. Staff recommends adoption of the majority option in the report. So I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. We have a couple of folks signed up. Rich Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. I was on this committee, and the thing that Glenn didn't mention was...
Mr. Fry, could you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Rich Fry, Ward 4. Former Planning Commission member up until December of 18. Have been on the Planning Commission for 8 years. The one thing that Glenn did mention that each of those meetings was 2 hours long, so we put a lot of time into this. Mr. Anderson did a good job, and so did Glenn's the staff. There was a lot of complicated stuff, as you could see from the slides that you saw there, and the members of the committee came to consensus on almost everything. There was only one item, which was the transportation. And it looks like it's not very much, but really it's a lot because it's doubling what our transportation fees were. And we're talking about affordable housing. And when you start doubling your transportation SDCs, and then adding a little bit more onto it, it's tough to make those things work for people that are just barely able to get into houses as it is. And multifamily, you know, they showed the difference in what it was. I did a 60-unit apartment complex in West Salem. My SDCs were $338,000 for 60 units. And now it's increasing another $1,900 per unit. So you can see that it's not just a little bit that we're talking about, it's a lot of money. And for the number of units that are out there, if we want to keep them coming to our community, to have the affordable housing that the young lady talked about, to have housing in our community, we need to keep the SDCs where we can. So I ask you to vote for the majority opinion that staff has recommended. I'll answer any questions.
Yeah, Councilor.
So, Mr. Fry, just to be clear, you are in support of changing the SDCs as listed today for the majority opinion, which is still an increase.
Yes, it is, and we understand that things increase. We're just asking for it to be the majority opinion and not to go with the extra on the transportation.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? No, thank you.
Now, come back. You're asking for the majority opinion. The majority opinion raised the rates, the minority opinion didn't.
No.
No.
So there was when we came
So you're
to
for the majority opinion?
I'm for the majority opinion, which is what staff recommended. And the difference was whether we averaged the number of trips over the last 20 years or whether we took from 20 years ago until today, which doubled it.
Okay.
So we went to 10 years ago because we said that people in the community hadn't been paying the full amount for 20 years.
Okay.
Which just confuses it even more.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Mike Erdman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Mike Erdman with the Home Builders Association of Marion and Polk Counties. And just as the previous speaker said, I want to thank the staff and the committee members. We had, as we said, a long process and got to know each other quite well over the last year and a half or whatever it may have been. You know, obviously, we are concerned as the trade group representing residential construction about housing affordability. Every increase, no matter how incremental, definitely prices folks out of the market, and so we're sensitive to that. But at the same time, we recognize that the SDCs have not been updated in a while, especially on the transportation SDC. And so we are supportive of the recommendation you have before you. We recognize there are, many positive benefits that come with the proposal, even though fees are going up. And as alluded to in the staff report, certainly the exemption, at least the 5-year sunset or the 5-year exemption on ADUs, certainly can help spur ADU development. That's a positive thing for the community. I think we can all agree on. I think we'll get quicker park development in those growing areas of town. I think that's an issue that everybody's sensitive to. And by allowing those parks to get developed much sooner than they have been, I think everybody gains as a part of that. And then also, I think the kind of the rolling of the connection fees into the SDCs is beneficial because there are certain infill parcels around town that have become financially less feasible to develop because of those connection fees that go back a few decades. And so kind of rolling them into the SDC, which frankly is probably where they should have been from the beginning, makes sense and makes it a little easier on some of that infill redevelopment. And so I'll be quick and just say we urge your support of the proposal before you. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions? Yes.
A question of staff?
No.
No, not yet.
Mr. Erdman?
Nope, we're good.
Nope. Okay. Anyone else? Any other member of the public? Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, my name is Mark Renz with Multitech Engineering, and I was not on the committee. I was fortunate to have an opportunity to be a guest at one of the meetings, but I think it's important for you to hear from someone who wasn't a participator that I think that the staff and the committee did a great job of working through a difficult task, and that, as Mike said, STC fees it's always painful when they're increased, but there's a lot of benefits that long-term that come from that. Staff and the committee did a good job in making some clarifications, some of the methodology and how how some of these costs are attributed and reimbursable, which is the world that I work in a lot, and I think that there are pluses that have come from that in this process, as well as, like Mike said, eliminating the connection fee. So we in my world, I believe that the development community is likely to be supportive of overall of what the staff and the committee are trying to do with the majority opinion. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, Bill?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Bill Fuji. I've lived on and off at the same address since 1956, so I'm a little bit familiar with the city. I urge you to recognize the staff and the committee members for this is a monumental effort. And I want to recognize that the leadership of Councilor Anderson, because this effort was based on fairness, predictability, and it's been unsaid, you folks are going to have to recreate the wheel again soon. And so we have a great record of a method that has a cogent process. And I really want to compliment Glenn to be the herder of the cats. We were not, some of us are not as quick as the others, so Glenn had to bring me along. And it is a complex process, but I reassure you, your staff left no stone unturned and did a wonderful job of making a record of, so you can recreate at least what we did. So for that, no matter what option you choose to adopt, I want you to fully recognize that the process was built on civility and consensus. Can't agree on everything, and you don't get everything you want. And I also want to recognize that you folks are going to get some parks to maintain, and the council will have to come up with the funds to do so. Just full disclosure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Fuji, for serving on the committee. Really appreciate it. This is one of those thankless jobs sometimes. Councilor Lewis?
Yeah, I hate to put you on the spot, Bill, but do you have a preference of the two choices?
Well, I believe it was Mark Twain that said that there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I made my living for 20 years doing a lot of statistical analysis. And there's always a time when you have to choose between whether it's the average or the mean or the 50% exceedance or whatever kind of method you're going to do. The minority chose a slightly more expensive route, and that was based upon what we thought was a fair choice of a statistical analysis. And yes, I was a voter of the minority. But Councilor Lewis...
I said I told you I needed to ask.
Indeed. It is your choice. We tried our best to do a job that would lead to consensus. And with any group, there's going to be a time when you're not going to be able to get everyone to agree on everything. Up to you folks, actually.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Fuji, for coming down tonight for your testimony. So you'd mentioned the process during this whole event and the meetings really was clear. Did it come up in this group? You'd mentioned maintenance costs for increased parks. Did it come up in this group about reviewing this process and the process to change? I know Glenn talked about the formula in here. I'm sort of missing, we have these goals that we've set, whether or not we're checking to see if we're on pace to meet those goals, maybe within a budget cycle, or checking periodically to see how they need to be adjusted. If we set this, if we choose the majority opinion tonight, and 2 years from now we find that we're still in the same boat with, right, are we able to go back and readjust? Was this discussed at all in this group about how to reevaluate, or if it would be the same process?
Well, I don't mean to speak for the entire committee, but just for myself. I believe that the staff is committed to reviewing as we go along. There's a very natural deadline, or not deadline, but opportunity. In 5 years, the tiny home exemption expires, and the staff will have to come back to you at that point to recommend, gosh, how many trips and do we charge for parks and all of these things that those kind of homes will generate. We chose to be consistent with the Planning Commission's recommendation, but put a timeline on it. And I think that that's a very natural time to pop up like a prairie dog and get out there and redo whatever needs to be done. And time will tell. There's a bunch of new developments. This Opportunity Zone hotel and downtown parking and all of those kinds of drivers will be junctures for you to say, well, gosh, guys, that's an issue that we wish we had addressed in the system development charge process. I think we waited too long to reassess, but it is complicated and a lot of staff time and a very dedicated amount of staff time will be developed. So council will have to struggle with whether or not to open the whole thing up or just take a look at things as we go. For instance, the cost differential between the majority and the minority, perhaps you could use that statistical tracking to understand whether or not you reopen that portion of the SDC process. But there'll be other things.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Berger wants to take your place.
Younger and wiser voices, believe me.
Hello, everyone. Richard Berger, Ward 2, actually, and I was on the committee. In my day job, when I'm not serving on committees, I actually work for a company called Mountain West Investment, and we are based here in Salem, but we actually build all over the western United States, and we build multifamily apartment complexes. And I just wanted to let you know, we look where we should build to try and make money. And we look at 3 factors when everyone says, how do you decide where you're going to build? And when we do our quick back of the envelope analysis, there's 3 things we look at in a community. It's rents, it's property taxes, and it's SDCs. So I just want you to be aware of that. And then, of course, you get into it and you figure out every fee there is, and you figure out everything else there is. But when I do my back of the envelope, those are the three things I look at. And I want you to be aware of that because you deal with taxes a lot, and obviously rents are out of your control. But this is a big one if you want to see housing in the community. The more this goes up, the less housing you have and the less projects you have. And there is no magic bullet that Councilor Anderson talked about, like what threshold do you lose? There is no magic bullet, but I just want everyone on the council to be aware that this might be a small point of your day, but this number really does affect development and will affect developers' choices on how much they build and where they build.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Councilor Cook?
So you mentioned you were on the committee. Are you for the findings of the committee?
Absolutely.
So the majority opinion, not the minority, then we're back to this, or?
Yeah, I'm for the majority, and as Member Fuji said, it's ultimately up to you, and that's a policy decision. Both are statistically valid. I think the majority is more reasonable, not just in the number, but also in how you look at how it is. The nuance of that is kind of hard to explain in a answer your question in a few seconds, but using the average I think is more reasonable. But also there's just the number factor of you're doubling that transportation SDC fee and then you're going up even more, quite a bit more. That's a big pill to swallow.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Mr. Beaton.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. I'm Russ Beaton, and I live at 1025 21st Street, and I think I'm the first person tonight that's identified their address, but that's what I'm used to. I would like to go along with everything that's been said about how smoothly this operation went. To a degree, I was the historical memory since I served on the task force, I don't know, 25 or 30 years ago that first established them. And I can tell you, going from what we have now to what we're proposing was a lot easier and a lot less raucous than going from zero to something, as it was back then. I want to point out one issue that you might think about as you look ahead, and that is that the SDCs, as is obvious, on any single-family dwelling are the same. That means for a very low end, and they're not low end as they used to be, regrettably, anymore, any low-end house pays the same SDCs as a very expensive house. And to my economist's point of view, that is a regressive feature. Now, making SDCs somehow scaled to the price of the unit, which would build more equity in and possibly do a little bit for affordable housing at the bottom end, is a tricky deal. We talked about this and really did not have the bandwidth to take care of that one and this one. It's an issue you might want to look into as you look ahead. That's all I'd say about that. I would be pleased to stay involved in that issue, although that would make me a three-time loser on this particular issue. One final thing, it was a pleasure to get to know Richard Berger on this one, and Richard's mother, Vicki Berger, was on the one 30 years ago with me, and I sent word back to through Richard to say hi to her. She came back with, "Is he on that one too? Tell him to get a life." So, but I would particularly like to commend Glenn as our statistical person. It would be tempting for you to say this is a report the committee put out, but in many ways we were watching Glenn put that committee out and helping him however we could. So thank you for your
Thank you, Russ, very much. Yes, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know you as Professor Beaton, so I'm hoping that you can explain something to me in a way that I might be able to understand it. And that's the can you distill down the difference in the methodology between the minority report and the majority report? It sounds like one's about averages and one's about a mean. Can you just explain that in lay terms, like for somebody like me to understand the difference in those two?
I wish I could, but I'll try. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's just a matter of when you use the base data. Is it more recent data or is it earlier data? And quite honestly, I would say to you, you're going to have to make a choice. Do we want to raise a little more money or a little less? Yeah. That's about it. SDCs per se, philosophically, are simply a way, and I think it's good advice to you to keep this in mind. They're a way of choosing how growth is paid for. That's all it is. Imagine an SDC of 0. Where would the growth costs be paid? They'd be paid for out of taxes by everyone else in the community. And it would, it would be easy to conclude that, well, we'd get more building then because the cost would be a lot lower. But would the community even be willing to pay for that? So you might get less. I mean, it's a balancing act, and as my more vested interest colleagues here, who I've got to say to all of them, to you about all of them, they were incredibly balanced in the issue of the community good in all this, even though they obviously represent their own particular interests. There was an amazing acceptance of what we do for the best of the community in this case. And even Command Councilor Lewis, who dropped in a time or two, and former Councilor McCoy. Another issue that Steve McCoy and Tom Anderson used to laugh about is that, well, we represent both sides of the council here, so even a balanced interests of the council, I think we're often represented in that process.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
And
Councilor Lewis?
Chris, I'd
No,
love
Councilor
to give
Lewis.
you a number, but as you know, I taught at a liberal arts school. We don't have to do numbers. We just have to ask the right questions.
Thanks, Russ. Councilor Lewis, do you want to ask your question? See if we can
I'd say that to
answer.
the mayor as well. He's also a graduate of that place.
Professor Beaton, you mentioned a topic that I think when I first came here 20 years ago, the community was debating. Does growth pay its way? Under the majority and the minority report, is there any assumption that under one, growth does not pay its way, under the other, growth does?
I don't think it boils down to that, because in the scale of the total amounts you're talking about, it's a fairly minor difference. But yeah, we would love, and I couldn't believe the degree of data that has been accumulated on this. 25 years ago, we didn't even have to consider how much it cost, what's the difference between putting in a 4-inch sewer main and an 8-inch sewer main per foot. But the degree of data that we have now as to what it actually costs is rather amazing. Even then, though, the choice of what you do is simply a choice of broad equity. Do you want to get more, or do you want to get less of the direct cost of development in this process? That's all I think I can say.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And for your service on the committee. Anyone else? Okay, any questions for staff? Yes, Councilor Cook.
Thank you. How will this affect existing projects if the start date for July 19? I know we've had some delays in work and just process for certain developments. If a project's already started, will SDCs change midterm? Is there a way that would happen with some existing green-lighted projects?
Thank you. The SDCs are established at the time the building permit application is filed. So if a project like the one you saw tonight, if it has not filed for its building permit, then if it waits until after July 1st, it would be subject to the new fees if it comes in before. So it's completely on the building permit application date.
Thank you.
How's our building inspector department set up to deal with the crunch that you're about to run into?
That's part of why we do the 50% to split that up. Yeah. When I got here in '95 when one of our first SDCs started, and we had, I believe, 3 months worth of work to do when I first started from that kind of a rush.
Okay, Councilor Lewis.
I just wanted to reiterate, the July 19th date is 50% of the proposed charges, and then the other 50% wouldn't be until the following year.
Yes.
Councilor Anderson.
Thank you. Could you bring up the slide, Glenn, that offered the minority and majority reports?
This
Yeah, on the single family.
That one? Or the
total. I want to see the totals, total increases.
That one?
Yeah.
That one, sir?
I have to look up this way to see it. So on the transportation, as you said, there's about a $600 difference, but the majority report is going to double it, and the minority report will, I don't know, 2.2 times or some other difference. So it's doubled no matter what happens, at least, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then I know we looked at this at some point, but where does the proposed charges, the proposed SDC charges fit in with other cities in the state in terms of what they propose it? In other words, are we high on the range, are we low on the range, or in the middle of the range?
That was harder to do than you'd think.
Listen, everything on this committee was harder to do than we would think.
What I did have preserved one slide for transportation. We found we were able to find enough data on that. That puts us, as you see here, about in the middle.
Okay.
Our old fee was pretty much at the bottom, and so it puts it. You can just see on the chart there. We're somewhere toward the middle.
That's in the
that's transportation.
Transportation. Okay, so that's transportation with the majority report.
Yes.
So the minority report would increase to something, but still we're going to be maybe move up one or so. We're still in the middle.
Actually, you're still below Portland in this particular example. Yeah.
Okay, we're still below Portland.
Yeah.
So we keep our same position with whichever one we go.
Yes.
Okay. Then, and we've talked about this a bit, and you brought it up too. How do you look at the size of the house? And in the stormwater, you look at the impervious surface, and in the water, you look at the size of the meter, and those are pretty easy things to do. But and I understand that the stormwater is going to be reviewed coming up in the near future.
So let me back up a bit. So just that topic came up to the committee after the draft methodology was sent out. That was a new topic that came real late. Well,
we didn't want to stop meeting, you know.
Just briefly, the water and sewer is based on meter size, so that's already addressed. A bigger house with a bigger meter would then be addressed, so that's already covered. The stormwater is based on an average home size, so that does not have variability at all, and that would be something that would be a good candidate for that once we have better data from the stormwater master plan. So that would be something we'd look at here when we go after the master plan's done. And then Parks and Transportation, in our brief look at it, it was very difficult to find conclusive data that showed that there was significant difference in population or in transportation impacts for larger or smaller homes.
And we had a discussion about that. I believe that you could have a empty nester couple in a huge house that are going to have less strips than a couple with 3 teenage kids in a smaller house are going to have, and that's part of the problem. But since we are reviewing the stormwater, I would hope that it would be possible for us to maybe look at and see if we have some data on some sort of graduated charge on the other two fees, the parks and the transportation, as suggested by Professor Beaton.
Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I just have a procedural question, I guess. These are all being updated kind of in one go, and there's 5 of them, right? SDCs. But do they need to be? I mean, can we, because some of these to me are pretty clear cut, like all the committee members agreed how to do it. but there's this one transportation that's standing out. And to me, I'm feeling like we need some more conversation about it. I need at least to better understand what exactly that split is and what the methodology being proposed is. But I'm just wondering procedurally, do we have to adopt these all as a package, or can we adopt them one at a time, or is that defined someplace, or can we?
We would have to rewrite some of it can be adopted separately, but we'd have to come back with an amendment to what we've prepared, because it is prepared as all 5 together.
Okay.
Okay. Is there, I was trying to follow this, I don't know if there was a chart for it, but was there kind of a net after things are the connection fees subtracted and all that, what the net impact per unit looks like? And you probably had it, and I just saw it go by.
This is the single family example. So the net.
But does that, there was the one reduction for connections, did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, and the connection fees are a difficult thing to assess, because the connection fee process is like an assessment, and simplistic.
But I pay it on a single-family home, right? If I build a house.
Not generally.
Not
generally. So it's it is a location-specific fee.
Okay.
That is based on if the property was assessed in the past. And so I'd say 9 out of 10 projects don't pay the fee, and one project out of 10 does pay the fee, generally in older neighborhoods, and the fee can be quite extensive. The fee, you see here, the fee difference is $240 for water, for example.
Okay.
A typical connection fee would be in the $4,000 range. So it's something that you pay nothing for 9 projects and then $4,000 for the 10th project. So it is an old style structure that it just didn't work. And SDCs came along to really provide a better way of doing that exact process. So that's so the connection fee is not in a new subdivision. They wouldn't pay any connection fee. It's generally in the older
Well, we're
areas.
doing this infill project, so do we have a penalty in place in the infill then on the connection fees?
Connection fees are generally in older infill areas where there were no assessments that were done. So that this helps infill by providing, it spreads out those fees to all projects.
Okay. So it does meet that goal?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple questions here. One, backing up to the stormwater SDCs. We already have 3 levels inside of that for equivalent dwelling unit for residential currently, don't we? Small, medium, and large? To where we could break that out in the future to deal with that end, right?
For the stormwater utility, we do, and we could do that here. I'll tell you, this is a very, very, very low SDC. This is 12 cents per square foot, or, but you know, it's.
I believe it's 20.
It was up to 20 cents?
I believe it's 20 cents.
Okay. So
Just for some
yes,
equity
when
across
when
the spectrum there.
Update the master plans and then come back to update this methodology. Stormwater is the one area where, like Glenn said, where we can probably make that change. And we are set up for that in the stormwater utility.
Right.
Yeah.
So we already have some segregation based on size.
We do.
In that, and
for the utility.
Right.
Yeah.
Non-SDC funding match. I got involved in the neighborhood associations right about SDC time coming on the upfront. And for the last 20 years, we have not been able to build a lot of things, and we've actually artificially kept the transportation SDC down because we didn't have match. Could we have changed the rules any time over the last 20 years, or what happened to now allow us to actually be able to build stuff?
So what happened was that I'd like to credit myself by assigning Glenn to do this project. Glenn had not worked on an SDC methodology before, and he was able to bring a new vision to what was possible, and I think was able to develop an idea that then the committee agreed that worked. I've worked with impact fees my entire career, and it would have never dawned on me to have done, because I was stuck in this old way of doing business. And I was shocked, delighted
when Glenn explained to me what he was proposing and what the task force was looking at, and it works great. So, yeah, we could have done it before had our minds been open enough to be able to think of that.
Follow up on that one? Sure. Because it basically pushed it all into full projects now that we have to do as a non SDC match. So what happens if we don't build those other 2 or 4 parks because we...
Right. At some point, there's some parks that have to be built by the community, for example.
But we have no timeline and there's no regulatory requirement for us to actually build them ever.
I'll allow the author to.
It's really a Parks Master Plan question, that the Parks Master Plan shows they need to be built, but the funding is not from SDCs. So there would need to be other funding provided for those generally infill areas.
But they could stay in the Parks Master Plan for 100 years and we just never build them, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Like any project.
Okay.
Like any
just
project.
because before we couldn't because we didn't have that other piece of match to build something.
We were always struggling with parks, especially some with transportation, although we had bond issues, but with parks especially, we were always struggling, and now we will not have that struggle.
And I do have to share that our consultant, Deb Glardy, deserves some credit here, too. I don't want to take all the credit. Okay.
I hired her, too. So.
Yeah, been working with her for a bit. And then one last one.
I'm still basking in the glow of Mr. Go ahead.
Of his hiring proficiency?
Go ahead.
The parks utilization by non-residential components, is that people who don't live in housing in Salem, so it's all people from outside of the community who are now in a business, or people when they're at work have a park they go to that's close by, the 4 per 10?
It'd be either. So the idea, though, is if you're living and working, then you'd pay a portion of your living and a portion of your working from both sides. If you're only working or only living, then you'd have less of a percentage. So it's just a true. The employees pay based on employee use, which is work parties and walking and all the different ways that employees would use a park. So yeah, you're not double dipping. You're just having the 2 elements separated.
Just knowing that, I mean, out off Gaffin Road where the Panasonic facility was, it's like there's nothing close by there. So how do we find that equity for actually being able to utilize something? I mean, there's no mass transit, there's no parks.
Yeah, so for example, looking at the Panasonic site, we're looking at preserving the oak grove.
Correct.
And so at some point there will be passive, but a recreation facility as a part of that. Now, would that be SDC eligible? That's a different question, but as an example, Mill Creek Corporate Center, that there's a plan for that whole stormwater basin to have passive recreation facilities around it. So there are these other opportunities for industrial sites, as an example, and business office sites to have recreation facilities. And frankly, we're late to this party. Parks SDCs have been charged to non-residential for a long time now.
And if I may, as we look, say, at that development, then did SDCs pay for anything in the Mill Creek Corporate Center?
No,
Parks-wise?
because
could they? Now, with this new methodology?
Not at Mill Creek, because Mill Creek is under a DDF. So Mill Creek, it pays, and in lieu of SDC, they pay the same amount, but it's a DDF, not an SDC.
Okay, just because it was a state-owned property previously and isn't in any master plans anywhere?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you please explain DDF?
Development district fee. So development district fees are charged in areas that are for properties that come off of state ownership that had not previously been planned and hadn't previously been thought about for systems development charges. So we created this development district fee thing that we assess at Mill Creek and at Sustainable Fairview.
One quick clarification from Councilor Nanke is that the neighborhood park component is exempted from non-residential. It's only the larger parks.
Okay.
So
and
just
I saw those 2 pieces and where there was a really little sliver on the neighborhood type park. So
okay, Councilor Cook.
Thanks.
Last question, just to clarify in case there's any question, when we talk about transportation costs in regard to SDC, that includes the whole shebang, sidewalks, roads, bike lanes, and that's sticking to our transportation systems plan and development along those lines,
Yeah, the list of projects has multimodal projects of all types.
as listed in the SRC 41. You said it was the 223-309. The 309 listed the
Yes.
projects. All of those transportation projects.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Kaiser.
I still need to ask the clarifying question about this majority-minority opinion methodology. So could you, I didn't quite catch it, or help me understand, I guess, what that methodology is? Because I see that there's two different average daily trips. One from 1998, one from 2008. But what does that really mean? Why those numbers? Why that metric?
Okay, enter the committee discussions here. You can see what the committee
Because I
talked
think that's
about
really
for
where the
hours.
crux of this is hanging on is.
So I'll do my best to explain here. The way an SDC methodology is established is we take today's trips, average daily trips, which right now, let's say on this chart is 800,000 today. We look forward 20 years and we figure 20 years worth of projects, and that's the growth costs. And then the growth units is the difference in trips between the future date and the today's date. So we take the 20 years worth of trips and we take the 20 years worth of costs, and that becomes the basis of the SDC. So the growth costs are SDC costs of that additional trips. So then the basis of the non-growth cost in that discussion is the initial trips at the start of the 20-year period, which is the minority opinion on this chart. So we say that the start of the 20-year period is the basis for the non-growth, because the growth is the next 20 years. So that's what the minority chose. The majority opinion said of that 20 years, they believed it was more equitable rather than to take the beginning of the 20 years to take the midpoint of the 20 years. So that's the majority opinion, was to take the average of the 20, not the initial of the 20. So either one's defensible.
Follow-up?
Yeah.
Just a follow-up, why? I mean, is there, what is used? Is there a standard, or is there other cities, how do they handle this?
This is unprecedented in any methodology.
Okay. So it's basically, though, you either start at the beginning of the 20 years or you start at the mid of
Yes.
the 20-year, or you start, it's sounding right in my head, but you're either going to project out to 2028 or you're going to use 98 to 2018. So, but my assessment of it is if you use the 1998, you're going to cost more per unit than you will if you use the 2008 number.
The discussion,
Essentially.
and Councilor Anderson, correct me, but the discussion of the committee really seemed to focus less on this number here and more on the number on the right, on the purple. The focus was really more on the cost per unit, less on the actual, correct me if I'm wrong.
I would never dream of doing that.
Okay.
I
Would you like to go ahead then?
Yeah, as long as we're on this, we're pulling back the curtain on the internal deliberations of the committee. But if I recall right, the original staff recommendation was the minority report.
Yes, the staff recommendation to the committee was what is the minority opinion today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I don't know, is there any reason why that was that you haven't already explained here?
Because of we believe that it was replicating the methodology logic, that the growth costs were from the trips from the beginning was the basis for the non-growth.
And is that the wonderful new discovery and vision that you had that Director Fernandez was talking about?
It's unprecedented. Our consultants, in this topic, the consultants had never seen this before.
Okay. Oh, I guess one more, sorry.
Sure.
And that's consistent with the same sort of methodology that we ended up using with the parks recommendation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you almost were a little hesitant there, but that was part of our goal, was to be consistent in the methodology in both the ones that are much harder to figure out, that is the parks and the transportation.
Simplistically, he makes fun of me for that term.
I'm not the only one.
the way we were able to make parks 100% eligible was the same logic that we used here, and without going into all the details. And so it was a fairness issue that we're equitable from the existing to the new.
Very good. Okay, I think we've exhausted this. I know we haven't because of the amount of time you all spent on it. Thank you very much for doing all this work. And Councilor Hoy, with your permission, I'm going to have Councilor Anderson make the motion because he did all the heavy thinking here.
I'm not sure how heavy it was, but I will tell you there was a lot of thinking
I know
about
you
this,
guys
and I
did a
will
lot
tell
of
you
work.
that also that somebody, I think it was Mr. Beaton, said it was 2 hours every meeting, and I had at least one meeting of 2 hours before every meeting with Glenn, so you
Yeah.
could start to help me look like I knew what
I've
I
been
might be
watching
thinking
your
about.
timesheets. You're putting in way too much time on this one, so we're going to put this to an end tonight. One way or the
Thank
other,
you.
okay?
So I move the minority report that's the City Council adopt a minority opinion which will result in a cost per growth unit of $463 per ADT, and that's laid out on page 3 of the staff report.
That's in addition to the staff recommendation? You're making the staff recommendation with that change?
Yes, thank you. I make the staff recommendation with the change that we adopt a minority report on the transportation SDCs.
Okay. Second. Ossick seconds that.
Thank you. First of all, before I get into the reasoning, I want to thank the staff, particularly Glenn Davis, but also Robert Chandler, who was in on every meeting, and Zach Deal, and Patricia Farrell, and Julie Warnicki, and Tony Whitler, and you recognize those names.
Is this
so
the Oscars?
Yes, but also definitely I do want to thank the people who were on that commission: Richard Berger, Russell Beaton, Mike Erdman, Rich Fry, Bill Fuji, Steve McCoy, and I echo everything about how we all worked diligently, and while we were representing our own interest, we also tried to do what was best for the city. And I stated at the beginning that the goal was to arrive at an outcome that was equitable for all parties. That means the developers and the public, and predictable for developers and builders to utilize in their cost calculations. And predictable, whatever we arrive at will now be predictable, but I think it was also equitable. We spent much time over 21 months and about the same number of meetings, because we had 2 or 3 after the November wrap-up, in detailed discussions and reached reasonable compromises in almost all areas, meaning we were in agreement on the recommendations after frank and open discussion. The minority reports adopts the original staff recommendation as to what should be the growth units in transportation, meaning what is the base ADT to use. You understand the difference comes to about $600 per a unit of growth, and as Mr. Davis pointed out, that still leaves us exactly where we are in the SDC charges. We are right in the smack in the middle, and we won't move up at all in terms of what other cities charge if we adopt the minority report. I think this also kind of reflects what now I will call him Professor Beaton said in his talk. You really just have to look at, do you want to get more money for a little more money for the improvements, or a little less money for the public improvements? And to me, for a couple of reasons, I would say we need the little more, which will still keep us in the middle of where we have been. And part of that goes to the state law on SDC. State law is very clear that these SDC funds cannot be used for maintenance or repair. All they can be used for is acquisition and construction. So in parks and transportation, when things, as they will, start to fall apart in the infrastructures of both those items, the maintenance and the repair is going to have to be paid for out of something other than SDCs, and it's going to have to be paid for out of monies that have not really been accumulated or reserved. And in the liquids, which I've been calling them, I guess one is a semi-liquid, but in the water, the stormwater, and the wastewater, the sewage, those are monthly bills that are paid, monthly fees that are paid, and as part of that fees we all pay on those bills, there is a reserve account set aside to provide for maintenance and repair in the future. And an example I would use is when we had the water crisis in Detroit Lake, we were able to provide the fix for that without raising the rates, because we had a reserve account, because the money came in and Public Works managed that money well, and so we could pay for that. And it doesn't happen in the maintenance and the parks. So to my way of thinking, that that makes it important for us to obtain, under Professor Beaton's theory, the slightly more amount of cost than the slightly less amount of costs, because then that frees up other monies that wouldn't be used, city monies that wouldn't be used to pay for the infrastructure developments, to use for other projects, like including potentially maintenance on projects that were built with SDC funds 20 years ago and are now needing to be maintained. So I think it's important to provide some upfront money that relieves the money that the city has available for the other maintenance projects. Again, I just want to say I thought I was honored to be on this committee, and I commend everybody who was in it, and I appreciate the efforts of everybody involved.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. I just would like to say thank you to everybody who was on the committee. It's an amazing amount of work. I guess in my thinking about what to do here, and I came to this with a complete blank slate and not a preconceived notion, but I was really compelled by what Mr. Berger had to say and what Professor Beaton had to say, and that is that the lower the fee, the more housing we're going to get, and that Professor Beaton said that really it sounded a little bit arbitrary how much money do you want to raise, essentially. And so I'm factoring those two things in, I'm leaning towards the majority report in my thoughts. So that's where I'm at. Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Similarly, I mean, big kudos to the committee, likewise to staff, because it's been a problem we've been fighting forever on how do you get certain projects done when you're starving for money at the municipal level. With that being said, going back to this conversation on majority-minority, we're charging a heck of a lot more than what we used to. We're actually, and the difference is, do we go up 2,000 or 2,500 on top of what wasn't there before? And I mean, we see it in the plan going forward on this is to phase it as well. And we're phasing a very large number on the transportation side, and it does put pressure on the affordability of housing. And I mean, we're screaming about that big time right now, and it's like, 2,000, 2,500, no different. Throw it on there. Somebody will pay for it. Well, it comes down to the renter and the end user that ends up paying for that, and that's going up from all different fronts. We're being assaulted, which is, I mean, you look at the overall cost, $18,000 for SDCs, then how much for the land? Before I even build a house, I'm well over $100,000 before I even can put anything on it. How can anybody afford anything? So I'm for the majority opinion, which may or may not end up being the minority opinion on council. We'll find out. We can confuse everybody based on terminology here.
Yeah, Councilor Kaiser.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you to the committee. What was it? 17 meetings over 18 months. That's dedication. So thank you for that. I agree kind of with what's been said, especially Councilor Hoy, talking about the transportation, majority, minority. I know developers, you're going to find the money someplace, or I guess the money will be distributed somehow. So if we increase that, it's going to be distributed in some other way. That could mean cheaper building materials. It could mean less square footage, more units, whatever it might be. But you have to have a way to recoup those costs as well. So I think that needs to be balanced. It's kind of amazing if we only had SDC starting in the mid-90s. I mean, imagine if we had started 20 years earlier, right? what our infrastructure might be like today. So I'm glad that we're examining it. I hope that we examine it on a fairly regular cycle. I don't know the last time this has been updated either. Never, okay.
Yeah.
So it's been, 20 plus years. Probably needs to be done a bit more often. So I'm leaning also to the majority opinion. I think we have committee members on there because they're in the business. And I think we need to, be open to that and knowing that we are increasing this, but we don't want to do it at such a rate that we scare people off or that Salem becomes known as it's too expensive to build there. So, you're not going to have the kind of housing availability that we do need. So that's a tough decision though too, because I see the need for having those increases also so that we can have better development in our city. So.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to second what my co-councilors have said with this, that I'm really excited and happy about the work that the committee's done on this. I do think it should be revisited fairly regularly, especially to see how we're keeping with our goals. We have these goals of sidewalks and parks, and we take a lot of staff time and a lot of public input. We want these things, and then we don't have a way to pay for them and more people coming into the community. As far as the majority-minority opinion, I keep coming back to what Mr. Berger said with rent, property taxes, and STCs. And with possible things looming outside of our purview at the city and how that affects rent, and also looking at our goals of housing and homelessness, I think it would be not unheard of to take the minority or the majority approach this time. And then later, if we see that that's not working, that we still have infrastructure needs, we still have park needs, we can go back and revisit this because of the process and the consensus that was created on this committee. I see that we have this deficit because for so long we weren't keeping up. And it's unquestionable, as Councilor Anderson said, we need to fill that deficit. And really, these increases, when you're talking about one rate to another, it's really not a large increase. But to be able to go back and say to somebody, we want you to fix the last 20 years that we were here, it can feel like a lot to bite off at once. And we really are in this together. It's easy to take the approach that there's one way or another way, but we can't do this without everyone at the table to make this work.
Okay, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, a couple of notes. Excuse me. One, started 20 years ago, and there was definitely talk about revisiting this, but then we had the biggest recession that anybody in this room has ever seen, and that kind of brought the stop to everything, including development. I too appreciate the work that the committee put in. I attended a few of the meetings, and I tell you, I just couldn't come back. I mean, my head hurt so bad. And don't take it personally, Glenn, but it was, and it is, and it always will be, one of the most confusing things that we do. The only worst thing that we could do is nothing. My concern is, sure, for a single-family house, we're talking about $2,600 addition rather than $2,000. But we're in a state right now where multifamily is what this community needs. And when you look at the multifamily costs, are they going to motivate multifamily developers to come to Salem? I don't think so. And lastly, it is only a difference of $600. I agree with Councilor Cook. Better to put in the lower amount today, which is what the majority wanted to do, and then revisit this at a more frequent. Hopefully, we won't have that next Great Recession, where there won't be any building, and we'll have opportunities to revisit things like this.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
I guess you're looking at me because nobody else has their hands up. Yeah. I don't think this has actually been said, but I think this in the record. It was 4-3 in the way on the majority minority, and the 4 votes were in the majority were Mr. Berger, Mr. Erdman, Mr. Fry, and former Councilor McCoy, and the 3 votes were I and Mr. Beaton and Mr. Fuji.
Right.
That should be fairly obvious, but I just wanted to put that out there.
That would have been my guess.
Yeah, just three things in response. The first one is the concern about emphasis on low-income housing. We looked at that, and we've done two things. One, we've waived the fees, all fees for ADUs for 5 years. Two, we have an exemption for low-income housing, and that applies to multi-unit development. So if you're building a 100-unit development and you want to say 20 of them are low-income housing, then you get an exemption from paying 20% of your SDCs. So we are taking steps that way. The second one was the concern about, well, are we going to drive Salem out of the market and put developers other place? I would agree with that if we were moving up or down in the scale, but we're still at the same place below Portland and in the middle of all the comparative cities there. So whether it's 2,000 increase or 2,600 decrease, it doesn't move us on the scale from somebody saying, gee, Salem's now more expensive than some other place to build, so I won't build in Salem. That just doesn't happen. Salem is always going to stay at the same place. And third, with respect to the fact that it's a $600, and I think it was Councilor Lewis who said this, maybe I was wrong, who's going to really end up paying for this? And as a practical matter, the home buyers are the people who are going to pay for it. And so $600 amortized over a 30-year mortgage, you know, I don't know how to work that out, but that's $10 a month or some extremely minor amount. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm really sympathetic to the idea of growth ought to pay for itself. I think that's been one of the real failures over time, was not, and still not really finding the correct way to do it. And SDCs, as I recall from the legislation and then the work on the council, was really aimed at trying to find that solution. We continue to be reliant on bonds. I mean, we still are, the serious money in dealing with sidewalks and streets and all the rest of it will come out of bonds. These really are helpful, I think, in a number of areas. The ones that I've been most concerned about have been parks. I think that that's where the funding for park construction has been missing the longest, I guess. I like the idea personally of visiting this again within the next few years. I think Councilor Anderson makes a very good point that the exemption for low-income housing is, I think, an extraordinarily good piece of this. So if whichever way it goes, that's going to be in it, and I think that fulfills one of our goals. In terms of, though, of kind of rent stabilization, I'm not sure as a broader policy, rent is on a continuum from low income right on through, and the pressures seem to build along the way. I'm not sure this resolves that. I'd like to make sure we look at this as a 5 to 10 year process, rather than 20 years is way, way too long. So otherwise, I think going with the majority makes some sense at this point in history, and then revisiting on the shortest possible recycle that we can to get back at this and take a look at particularly the transportation portion, but I'd like to look at the other parts as well. Not on the committee. Anderson, you can do that again. But I think this is a really important topic that needs to be kept far more current to keep us moving along and meeting those growth costs in the future. So should we go ahead and vote? All those in favor of the motion for the sorry.
Motion, just can you review the motion?
Yeah, the motion which includes the minority report, Councilor Anderson's motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Mr.
You want to make
Mayor?
a second motion then?
Yeah, I do. I move the staff recommendation, including the majority report.
Second.
Second by Hoy. Okay.
I don't think we need to discuss this anymore.
We don't need to debate this. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. We are to special orders of business. It is now 33 degrees outside.
I'll be quick. It's clear.
3.3A, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move staff recommendation to authorize the city manager to execute the attached amendment to purchase and sale agreement with Dogwood Heights LLC to extend the closing date for the acquisition of real property.
Second. Second by Hoy.
Okay, great, thanks. I wanted to pull this because this was an issue that came up, and it kind of touches on all of the issues that we've discussed tonight. Lack of sidewalks and transportation in Ward 7, issues of equity and topography, landscaping, issues of infill. So I really appreciate staff for handling of this. I know there have been some delays and setbacks, as there are with any projects, but I just wanted to highlight it and pull it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. We'll move on then to information reports.
Again, very informative.
Really informative information reports this time. Did anyone want to speak to any of them? Staff? No? Okay, we will move along then. Ordinances, first reading.
Ordinance Bill Number 119, an ordinance relating to system development charges, amending SRC Chapters 21, 41, 72, and 73.
Who's going to move it?
I move staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
Second by Nanki. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion passes.
Ordinance Bill Number 319, an ordinance declaring certain territory located at 4945 Delton Lane Northeast annexed to the City of Salem, prescribing zoning and withdrawing the territory from the Salem Suburban Rural Fire Protection District.
That's right.
I move staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Cook. Discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion passes. We have no second readings. I don't see anyone else here to make a public comment, so we are adjourned.